You buy a truck, you paint it, stock the fridge, park it somewhere with foot traffic, and start selling. No landlord, no 5-year lease, no permission from anyone but yourself. That's the pitch, and it's a good one. Food trucks feel like the last honest way to own a business in America. Here's the twist. In New York City, the city charges $200 for the permit that lets you legally park and sell. On the street, that same permit trades for up to $25,000. You can own the truck outright, park it perfectly, cook flawless food, and still not be allowed to turn the fryer on. On paper, the math looks almost generous. A used truck runs $30,000 to $60,000. A new one built out with a flat top, a fryer, refrigeration, and a generator can run over $100,000. Add signage, a wrap, your first few weeks of inventory, and you're looking at a total startup cost somewhere between $50,000 and $200,000, which, next to opening a restaurant, sounds almost cheap. A brick and mortar can eat $200,000 before you've served a single plate. A truck gets you into business for a quarter of that, sometimes less, and the pitch writes itself. No dining room rent. No 5-year commercial lease with a landlord who can raise your rate whenever renewal comes around. No hiring a full front-of-house staff. You go where the customers already are. A lunch rush downtown on Monday. A brewery on Thursday. A festival on Saturday. If a location stops working, you drive somewhere else. Restaurants can't do that. The checklist, when you first look it up, doesn't seem like much of an obstacle either. A business license. A mobile food vendor license. A health department permit, a fire safety permit, food handler certifications for anyone working the truck. Most of these run somewhere between $50 and $1,000 each. Read that quickly, and it looks like paperwork. A few forms, a few fees, a few weeks of waiting, and you're on the street. That's the dream stage. This is where most people stop researching and start shopping for trucks. Here's what that checklist doesn't tell you. Those permits aren't issued by one office. They come from 5 separate agencies that, in most cities, don't share information with each other. The health department won't even process your application until you can prove you already have a signed agreement with a licensed commercial kitchen, which you're required to rent, whether or not you've sold a single taco yet. The realistic timeline from first application to first legal day of service isn't a few weeks, it's 8 to 12 weeks in a smooth city, and in plenty of places, considerably longer. Every one of those weeks, the truck payment is due, the insurance is due, the commissary rent is due. None of it pauses while you wait for a stranger in an office to sign a form. The dream is a truck in a line of customers. The reality starts with a stack of applications, sitting on desks you don't control. From the sidewalk, a food truck with a line of 10 people looks like a business that's printing money. Cash changing hands every 90 seconds. A menu with 8 items. Prices between $12 and $18. It looks simple. It isn't. Underneath that line, there are at least 5 separate layers of cost, and most of them are invisible to the person standing in it. Start with the obvious one. Food cost. Industry standard puts this between 28 and 35% of what you charge. Sell a $14 bowl, and $4 to $5 of that is gone before you've paid for anything else. Before gas, before your own time, before a single permit fee. That's not unique to food trucks. Restaurants live with the same math, but a restaurant has a dining room full of tables turning over all night to absorb it. A truck has one window and one line, and when the lunch rush ends at 2, the selling day is basically over. Second layer, and this is where trucks start looking less like restaurants. The commissary kitchen. Almost every city requires food trucks to operate out of a licensed commercial kitchen. A home base where you prep ingredients, wash equipment, dump wastewater, and store inventory overnight. This isn't optional and it isn't occasional. Most health departments won't issue your permit without a signed commissary agreement, and you're paying for it, whether you use it 7 days a week or 2. Commissary rent runs $500 to $2,500 a month, depending on the city and how much space and time you've booked. That's a fixed cost sitting underneath the business every single month, rain or shine, whether the truck sells anything or not. Third layer, insurance. Truck insurance alone runs $3,000 to $5,000 a year, but most commissaries require something separate on top of that. A minimum of $1 million in general liability coverage. with the commissary itself named as additional insured on your policy. You're not just insuring your own risk, you're insuring someone else's building as the price of being allowed to use it. Fourth layer is the one nobody puts in the pitch deck, the permit itself. And this is where the real numbers stop looking like a rounding error and start looking like a second mortgage. The official fee for a food vending permit in a city like New York is $200. That's the number printed on the government website. That's not the number vendors actually pay, because the city caps how many of these permits exist. A limit set decades ago and barely moved since. A black market has grown up around the ones already in circulation. Vendors report paying $14,000, $18,000, $20,000, $25,000 to get access to a permit that costs the city $200 to issue. Sit with that gap for a second. $200 on paper, $25,000 in practice. That's not a fee, that's rent, paid to whoever happens to be holding the paperwork. And the fifth layer is the quiet one, the one that doesn't show up on any expense sheet at all: idle time. Every week your truck spends waiting on a delayed inspection, stuck on a permit wait list, or shut out of a commissary that fell through, is a week where every other cost keeps running and $0 come in. A $100,000 truck sitting in a parking lot, fully built, fully staffed, unable to legally turn on the fryer, is not a business on pause. It's a business actively losing money, at full speed, while looking completely idle from the outside. Put those 5 layers next to each other, and the picture changes completely. Food cost eats a third of every sale. Commissary rent is a fixed monthly bill regardless of revenue. Insurance protects a building you don't own. And then there's the permit, where the government's printed price and the real market price can differ by a factor of 100. $200 versus $25,000. Read that again. That's not a hypothetical worst case. That's the ordinary cost of doing this legally, in the cities where demand is highest. This is why the daily revenue numbers that sound impressive, $800 to $2,500 on a good service day, need to survive 5 different toll booths before any of it becomes profit an owner actually keeps. Take away food cost, and you've lost a third. Subtract the month's share of commissary rent and insurance, and another chunk is gone before lunch service even starts. Amortize the cost of the permit itself, if you had to buy your way into one. And you're not looking at a small business with low overhead anymore. You're looking at a business where a huge percentage of the sale price was already spoken for, before the truck even opened its window that morning. Some of it going to food, some to a landlord you never meet, and some of it going to a person who never cooked a single item, never owns a truck, and simply happened to be holding a piece of paper the city decided to make scarce. That's the part that gets lost in the dream. The line outside the window is real. The $12 changing hands is real. But by the time it's split 5 ways, food, rent, insurance, permit, and the cost of every day spent waiting instead of selling, what's left for the person who actually built the business is a lot thinner than the line outside would suggest. Here's the mechanism stated plainly. The truck was never the business. The business is the legal right to operate it, and that right is a separate, tradable asset, controlled by people who have nothing to do with your food, your prep, or your customers. Think about what a permit cap actually does. A city doesn't limit how many food trucks can exist. It limits how many pieces of paper it will issue that let a truck legally sell. In New York, that number was set in 1979 and 1983, decades ago, for a city that looked nothing like it does now, and it's barely moved since. The demand for those permits kept growing every year. The supply stayed frozen, and whenever a government fixes supply while demand keeps climbing, the market doesn't just disappear. It goes underground and a new class of asset gets born. The permit itself, detached from any truck, any menu, any actual food business, and sold purely as access. This is the part that separates a food truck from a normal problem like rent or ingredients. High food costs are a business risk you can manage. Change your menu, raise your prices, cut a slow-moving item. A permit black market isn't a cost you manage. It's a toll you pay to a stranger before you're allowed to compete at all. And no amount of good cooking, smart pricing, or hustle gets you out of paying it. You could run the best taco truck in the 5 boroughs and it wouldn't matter. Because the thing standing between you and your first legal sale isn't your skill. It's whether someone else is willing to sell or rent you access to a number the city decided to stop issuing 40 years ago. And the trap has a second jaw on the other side of the truck, because most cities also require a signed agreement with a licensed commissary kitchen before they'll even process your health permit. Your legal right to operate isn't just chained to the city's permit office. It's chained to a private landlord's business staying solvent. You're not just renting counter space and a walk-in cooler. You're renting your own ability to legally exist as a business from someone whose lease, whose finances, whose relationship with their own landlord you have zero visibility into and zero control over. If that commissary loses its lease, gets shut down by an inspector, or simply goes out of business, your permit, the one you may have spent thousands of dollars and months of waiting to secure, becomes worthless overnight, not because you did anything wrong, because the ground you were standing on moved. This is why overhead is high doesn't actually explain what's happening here. High overhead is something every restaurant, every retail shop, every small business deals with. Rent goes up, ingredients cost more, insurance premiums climb. Painful but ordinary, and largely within an owner's control to manage or absorb. What's happening with food trucks is structurally different. Two separate third parties. A government permit office operating on a supply cap that predates most current operators, and a private commissary landlord who holds sole authority over your legal compliance. Each hold a veto over whether your business is allowed to exist at all. Neither veto has anything to do with your food, your prices, your customer reviews, or how well you run the truck day to day. You can do everything right and still lose the ability to operate because someone upstream of you either raised the price of access or lost their lease. That's the trap underneath the dream of low overhead and total independence. The truck gave you freedom from a landlord's 5-year lease, but it quietly handed that same leverage to two other landlords instead. One behind a government counter, deciding how many pieces of paper exist, and one holding the keys to the only kitchen the city will let you legally use. You didn't escape the toll booth by buying a truck. You just moved which road it's parked on. New York City is the clearest version of this story, because the numbers are so extreme they barely need commentary. The cap on food vending permits was set in 1983 at 3,000 citywide permits. Over the decades it crept up slightly, but as of today the total sits around 5,100 for a city of more than 8 million people, with a street food culture that's only grown since the 1980s. The official price the city charges for that permit is $200. That number hasn't meaningfully changed either. What has changed is everything around it. By the late 2010s, more than 2,000 people sat on the wait list for a permit, and the city had stopped even taking new names for years at a time because the backlog was so deep. Vendors interviewed by local outlets described paying real money to work around it. Mohammed Rahman, who's run the quick meal cart in Midtown for over a decade, said he pays $15,000 every 2 years for his permit, not to the city, to another person. The city charges only $200, he said. Why should I have to pay $15,000? All the profits go to someone else. Monawara Sultana, selling hot dogs outside a hospital in the Bronx, described her permit rent doubling to $14,000 for 2 years, an increase set not by the city, but by the private permit holder she rents it from. One vendor known in reporting simply as Song described the process of buying his way in. An initial down payment to a middleman he'd never met, handing over stacks of $100 bills with no receipt before the truck was even taken in for inspection. Total cost, once the white sticker was on the truck, about $20,000. By 2021, city reform efforts, Local Law 18, added new permits to the system for the first time in decades. The addition, 445 permits a year, against a waitlist that by then numbered in the thousands. The math doesn't close. It was never designed to. The second story is different in shape but identical in mechanism. In Philadelphia, the city's largest indoor food truck commissary, a facility called Industrial Food Truck run by an operator named Gary Koppelman, served as the legal home base for dozens of trucks at once. The shared kitchen their health permits were contractually tied to. In the spring of 2022, Koppelman lost the lease on the building after falling behind on payments. Following years of lawsuits from customers over defective and undelivered trucks, the tenants inside, real, named businesses, including Redstone Pizza and Dos Hermanos Tacos, found out their commissary was about to disappear with roughly 10 days' notice. 10 days to find a new licensed kitchen, get it approved, and update their permits, or lose the legal right to operate at all. I just didn't know what was happening or where I was going to go. And this is my livelihood, said one tenant, a slider truck owner named Tenable. Another described the scramble bluntly. Nobody in the building understood what was happening or where they'd end up. A new operator was found just before the deadline, and the trucks kept operating. But notice what almost happened, and why. Not one of those businesses served a bad meal, missed a health inspection, or did anything wrong. Their entire legal existence was suspended because a landlord they didn't choose and couldn't control ran into financial trouble of his own. In New York, the toll is paid up front, in cash, to a stranger holding a scarce piece of paper. In Philadelphia, the toll is paid continuously, in dependency, to a landlord whose survival you have no say in. Different cities, different mechanisms on the surface, the same underlying trap underneath. The truck was never the asset that mattered. Access was, and access belonged to somebody else. So who actually wins in this model? Not the person standing at the window taking orders. In New York, it's the long-time permit holders. Many of them retired vendors who stopped working the truck years ago but kept the paperwork, collecting $15,000 or $20,000 every renewal cycle from someone else doing the actual cooking. In Philadelphia, until it collapsed under its own weight, it was the commissary landlord, holding leverage over dozens of businesses at once, none of whom had any real alternative. In both cities, the person who profits most isn't the one who bought the truck, built the menu, or stood in the heat all afternoon. It's whoever happened to be holding the choke point. Best case, if you're getting into this today, you land in a city without an artificial permit cap, find a commissary that's financially stable and easy to work with, and the low overhead and mobility actually deliver what the dream promised. Flexibility, lower startup costs than a restaurant, and a business that goes to the customer instead of waiting for one to walk in. Worst case, you've sunk $100,000 into a fully built truck, and you're legally not allowed to turn it on. Not because your food is bad, not because customers didn't show up, but because a stranger with a permit decided the price today is $20,000. Or a landlord you've never met just lost his lease. Either way, the lesson underneath both outcomes is the same. A food truck lets you escape one landlord, the one who'd otherwise hold a 5-year lease on your dining room. But it doesn't erase that kind of leverage. It just hands it to 2 new landlords instead. One behind a permit counter, and one holding the keys to a kitchen you don't own. You didn't buy a business. You bought a truck, and then you went looking for someone willing to rent you permission to use it.